third episode of What Keeps You Up at Night on The Tsunami is Coming. I am thrilled to welcome Frédéric Raillard today. Frédéric and I, it's not really a secret. We met on a live TV set during the 2024 US elections,
Mhm.
and this gave me a wonderful opportunity to reach out to you again. So thank you very much for joining me. You are the CEO and co-founder of Fred and Farid, an international agency in advertising. And you are also the founder of Imagination, AI Imagination, where you try to pioneer work at the intersection of branding, storytelling, and AI. So maybe you'll tell
Correct.
us more about this. Dear Fred, again, thank you for joining me. And as always, tell us what keeps you up at night.
Thank you, Jeremy. And first of all, I have to say I love to listen to all your analysis about US because you're like such an expert. I mean, I'm learning each time I'm listening to you,
Thank
and
you.
so it's a pleasure to interact more apart outside this TV show where we met. And so I think it's a paramount question. It's a very important question. What keeps you up at night? I love that. I love this concept. And before to come to this little interview, I had a thought about that. I was like, well, I think it's interesting if I'm totally honest with you, because if I say, what keeps me up at night, is like, the invasion of AI in our world, blah, blah. I'm going to be fake, so I'm like, okay, let's be honest, like what really keeps me up at night, at my age. And, what keeps me up is the tension in my life in between my daily life, being an advertising guy, selling, persuading people to buy services, brands, and products, etc., with I would say the invisible world, the invisible world, the world of energies, and since I was very very young, I've always been interested in kind of paranormal and in all kind of experiences, those voyance, clairvoyance, work on energies. Yeah, also channeling, I met people who channel, people who have died, or the afterlife, etc. I've always been, I don't know why, I was like a teenager, not the teenager in nightclub. I was more the teenager, asking big question about life. Where is this going? Walking at night, in the forest alone, connecting with trees, etc. I was a weirdo. The track. I'm a weirdo. That's
That's
who
a
I was.
generational common point. Yeah.
Yes, I can really connect with this track, because I was a weirdo. I was like completely and I've always been very interested in. I was reading so many books about paranormal and all that, and I had myself like weird experiences. First of all, I remember all my dreams, etc. And since I'm born, I can see aura, colors around people, etc. I've always been, and I had some kind of psychic moment in my life, where, for instance, my brother was buying a house, and I could tell him the name of the person who died, and no one told me. I just read it here in my brain. It was here, and so I have attention. I really have attention in between. This like accelerating world of selling, advertising, persuasion, and all that. And which is has some. I don't want to fall into bad cliche on advertising, right? Because there are some fantastic people and some really interesting things about advertising. It's not just selling; it's more than that for sure. But I'm drawn into this world during the day, which is accelerating, passion thrilling, etc., but also super stressful and super, I would say, horizontal. And at night, I feel the need to be a bit more vertical in my life, and I have a tension between horizontality and verticality. And I'm trying to connect the two worlds, but it's not so easy. So right now, I'm working with voyance, un voyant, so clairvoyant, a clairvoyant person, to learn, how to distinguish in your brain what is pure product of your imagination and what is actual channeling. And there are a few technicals, to learn how to understand if what you have in mind is your pure imagination or your thoughts, or what you have in mind is coming from downloading something, downloading an information. And so I'm in the middle of those two worlds. I'm in the middle of those two worlds. I've always been. But now in my age, I'm a little bit less. I accept less to completely shut down that part of me. I'm like, life is short, and I've been shutting down this part, and I want to reconciliate those two me, And so I'm working on that, and this is really keeping me up at night.
Keeping you up at night. But Frederic, it's very striking, and very very honest of you. So thank you. What I find quite striking above all is that you have this figure of a CEO of a company doing business on the one hand. You're sharing something very honest on the other. Is this maybe a way for you to make sense out of the absurdity of the world we live in right now? And this request from maybe your clients, maybe your stakeholders, maybe the people who are dear to your heart to give sense to a world that has no sense anymore.
Yes, I think it's a very relevant question, Jeremy, because you precisely said the word, it's sense, lack of sense and lack of meaning, lack of sense. It's interesting because one of the exercises we do in advertising is to define the sense of purpose of a company. And until you don't have this sense of purpose, it's really hard to kind of, in a way, motivate people apart from work, because this is where your income comes from. But in order to have a successful company, you need to have a higher sense of purpose that is really motivating for you. So you said the word sense, and it's true that the society we live in now is losing sense completely. And it's paramount in understanding how to make a brand successful, because successful brands are coming up with sense, meaning, sense of purpose. That's why they succeed. That's why they perform more, because we're craving for sense, we're craving for meaning. And it's true that when we hear, especially like in the recent time, we live in a world with so much tensions and so much like at the edge of World War III, which is madness, complete madness. And definitely, I think we because the world doesn't make sense anymore, we feel the need maybe in our personal life to find sense for ourselves, at least in our little lives. So I fully agree with you. It's connected. It's really connected to the lack of sense of our society, our world today.
It occurs to me there was one question I wanted to ask you preparing before we went on air, and I forgot. So let me ask you live. Are you a fan of Stranger Things, the
Oh,
Netflix
yes,
series?
yeah, I mean, I didn't see all the seasons, but I saw the first season,
The first season.
and
And,
yeah.
and you know what's striking about Stranger Things is this is not Agatha Christie. This is not a linear story of someone dying and us figuring out who died and who died we know, but who killed the person, right? Stranger Things, we're looking at something and we just don't know what we're looking at. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that in intelligence services, they would call Agatha Christie the puzzle, and you need to figure out what the puzzle is. And Stranger Things, they would call it a mystery. You just don't know what you're looking at in the first season.
Yes,
Does that
yes.
summarize the world we live in? We live more in a mystery than a puzzle.
That's very true. And you had that also in the old series Lost. Remember
Yes.
Lost?
Ah,
And
yes.
we were lost as a viewer.
Yeah.
We were even lost at the end of the last season.
Mm.
And so yeah, I think it's kind of miming exactly, and maybe that's the resonance. That's why it worked so much. What you just said is because it's a little bit miming what we live in our society. And also, I think there's something additional to that, and I think it's very relevant what you said. And additional to that, I think the sense of reminding people duality in everything, because especially when you live in US, I live in US, I live in New York. Um, Everything is very Manichaean. It's good and bad. It's being binary. It's like 0 or 1.
Mm.
And period. There's no nuances. Everything is Super Bowl. Everything is red or blue. And you can't have a moderate position on anything. You need to completely embrace one block with everything, or the other block with everything. And that's the caricature of US. It's Manichaean, it's binary, and
Polarized.
polarized. It's super polarized, and it's moving from blue to red, from blue to red, etc. And in a way, it's the opposite of the philosophy of China, Zhongguo. Zhongguo
Mm.
is the country of the middle. And
Mhm.
they hate this. They want to move forward. They don't want to do that. And so Zhongguo. And so I think also that series bringing this, like it's a duality, the dual world, the other world, and the duality in every one of us. That's I think we can relate to that. And because we tend to see, in a way, the enemy outside us, outside the system, outside us, and we tend to point the enemy outside, whereas we are dual, every one of us. It's again, coming back to Eastern philosophy, it's the yin and yang,
Mm.
we are both, and it's inside us. And also, I think that theory is reminding this, is reminding the two sides of everyone. And so for those two reasons, I think, yeah, it's very relevant. Usually when you have like a world success like that, it means you have touched the nerves of society
Yeah.
somewhere, somehow.
And maybe our deepest contradictions that we either have to live with or that basically make it so hard
Yes,
to sustain. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Frederic, this was a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. And will you come again?
yes, of course, yes, absolutely,
Awesome.
absolutely. Love interacting with you, connecting with you, and I will keep hearing your brilliant analysis about US.